My third background question is this: what to do about a gnawing problem? And this is one to which I referred a moment ago. That is, as Doris has argued, if the Baroque appeared during European social crisis, and in its Latin American incarnations, it was also an expression of resistance to the power structures its aesthetic programs sought apparently to reinforce, ought we in Canada to see the contemporary Neo-Baroque as an expression of resistance, capitulation, or something else? And is its political effect uniform across the multiple incarnations we might identify? And to this question, which is obviously highly complex with regard to globalization and transculturation, I will say that I will leave it open and as a significant ongoing problem. Before showing you examples of the works from both of the cultural and exhibitionary context in order to begin to develop my argument, I also want to draw attention to two overarching themes or shared sensibilities I think we see across all of the works I'll be presenting, the first being allegory. So the Benjaminian idea of allegory as developed in The Origin of German Tragic Drama, and as discussed by Victor Zamudio Taylor in his essay, Ultra-Baroque, Art, Mestizaje, Globalizations, excuse my Spanish pronunciation, which is found in the Ultra-Baroque catalog. That's what I'm referring to here. I find this construction exceedingly important in that it demonstrates the necessity for allegory to a critical engagement with modernity. And while my limited time here will not allow a thorough unpacking of the argument, a few points from Benjamin by Zamudio Taylor should be foregrounded as follows: that allegory has the potential to express history and its experiences in dynamic ways. That allegory allows us to shift the emphasis from myth to history and to critique long-held classical values. And finally, that allegory, according to Benjamin, according to Benjamin, any person, any object, any relationship can mean absolutely anything else. All of this, by way of describing allegory with reference to our shared interest here, reminds us of the capacity of the Baroque to become a model by which to comprehend crisis, and that's also from Zamudio Taylor. The second overarching notion that I want to remind us of is, of course, horror vacui. And even though it's a somewhat obvious sensibility, I'm interested to note across all of the works is this quality of horror vacui. And the aversion to empty spaces certainly characterizes the Baroque and the works in the Ultra-Baroque. And I am somewhat surprised to find also the work of contemporary Canadian artists that I'll be showing you. Indeed, I'll soon be speaking about the construction of a paradigmatic notion of northernness in modern Canadian art, but I think that we'll see in the works of the artists I'll be showing now that there is anything but a bleak, unpopulated landscape being invoked and presented. So now I want to just take a little bit of time to familiarize you with some of the works from the exhibitions that I'm talking about. And as I say, the first, I'm simply referring to some of the work from the Ultra-Baroque exhibition, which you could certainly attend to in the publication, which belongs to Walter. And so I've chosen about 10 or 12 works that I simply want to show you as a point of reminder. And I'm not deeply familiar with the works, but I can say that certainly some of the tropes and practices of the Neo-Baroque, or that we associate with postmodernity in the Neo-Baroque, are very much in evidence in this kind of work. Obviously, we have appropriation and parody, and you can see, unfortunately these are not great images, but you can see that there's a revolver being pointed at what looks like a stuffed animal in a museum of natural history. And these are wonderful images, and I'm sorry that I don't have a better version of them, but for those of you who haven't seen this work before, clearly the employees of the month, the employees who could in fact be people who work in the back stage of a gallery or a museum, but probably are not. But they're essentially acting out images, parodying or making a pastiche of images from art history. And they're wonderful kind of tableaus. And this by Miranda Fernanda Cardoso, was a huge installation in which she's kind of performing a kind of scientific activity, seemingly, in a very kind of highly colored and what we might call in a kind of conventional way Baroque environment. This kind of activity with, apparently with fleas, and we're not even certain that were real fleas involved, but there's of course a live feed to what is a rather sad little example of a monitor, or on a monitor. And this is actually a wonderful work, and I'm afraid I actually don't know the specific material, although I could probably look it up in the catalog right now, but I do know it's a meat product. So we have these skateboards that are made of meat products. And I mean, I think the wonderful thing about this work is, this work and the next by the same artist, entitled Kant, as you can see why it would be. But this kind of intersecting of the kind of the language of the street, but obviously a semiotic of the street as well. And some of the work, I would say, 15, 18 years later, seems somewhat derivative in that I think we've seen a lot of work that involves found objects, toys, etc. And in fact, some of the work I'm showing you today does. And so I think that that's one of the things that, in terms of contemporary art and the kinds of strategies that these artists are using, that clearly they intersect with what has become the sort of stock in trade of many contemporary artists. And so despite that we're wanting to argue that there's a kind of Neo-Baroque impulse in this work, there's also, I think, a very sort of canny awareness, or maybe we could say this work has influenced some of that canny awareness of the strategies of modern and contemporary artists. So some of the work, I would say, more than others, does hold up this much time later. This is a work made of glass. Clearly, it's obviously a strong reference to the body, to religion, to a kind of, and also to drug culture, as kind of street culture.
It's one of my favorites.
It's wonderful. And in fact, one of our friends, who is the mother-in-law of Matthew Teitelbaum, who's the director of the Art Gallery of Ontario, has one of these pieces from this set in her home, and it's wonderful. And actually, the big nail there, and you can see that these, it being entitled Virgins and Crosses, that sort of vaginal mandorla-like shape is so much in evidence, and unfortunately you can't see that those little tags below each one actually has the name of a person, and it's, Miguel, etc. These are very much, invoking kind of everyday people, but in a kind of saint-making kind of way. And I mean, we're not sure if they're homages to the dead. They certainly might be, given the kind of culture that's being invoked. And the glasswork itself is really quite wonderful. Yeah, done. And then this last really kind of bizarre work by Mayor Baseman, who's quite a brilliant artist and sort of a Renaissance man, I suppose, to kind of cross periods. But he's a writer and a curator, and also does artwork. And this is actually an homage to his mother, which I guess we could guess by the invocation of psychoanalysis and psychotherapy. So those